time will come when you can sit on the wall, not yet. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Brother Askari, do we want to open the curtain or for the sisters? It's okay? Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum. I thank you very much for coming this evening. We are running just slightly late because we had traffic along the way from the airport. This evening was dedicated to our continuing series, what we call Dialogue with Our Youth. And youth can mean anything. A lot of us who have gray beards, we still think we are in our youth, and that is all right. But tonight, we have dedicated the night to allow the youngsters of the community to take advantage of a couple of visitors who are visiting us from Toronto. They are here to conduct a Sunday school teachers workshop tomorrow and half of Sunday. So while they were in town, I thought it would be a good opportunity to have them come here and discuss with our youth. The reason we did that, because they have done this in several parts in Canada and the US, where they've held similar gatherings by talking and discussing issues that are relevant to our youth, both our brothers and sisters. The forum for tonight will be very simple. We have a couple of brothers here who are visiting us, Dr. Liaqat Takeem, who has been here before, recently in April, and he is a visiting professor in 3 universities in Canada, and presently also visiting professor in University of Miami. So he just flew in from Florida this evening for this special program. We also have Brother Nisar Shirali, who is an active community member in Toronto. He has conducted several youth sessions and is very popular among the youth down there. So we will have both of these brothers not only addressing the youth, but conducting a dialogue with our youth, which I think is very, very important, to allow the youth to ask the questions and get hopefully an answer to their satisfaction. The time frame for tonight, hopefully we can end this by 10:15, and maybe it can extend 15 minutes longer since we start a little bit later, depending on the enthusiasm and the interest of the people. And without wasting too much time, I'd like to welcome and ask Brother Liaqat Takeem to please come forward. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Just one more thing. What we will do is Brother Liaqat will address for a few minutes, and then we will open up for an open forum. You can ask questions relevant to our community, relevant to our religion, relevant to the environment that we're living in. And we'll get those questions. I'll be the moderator, questions from the brother's side and the sister's side. And then I will screen those questions, not because I know anything better, but sometimes we have many questions of the same type, and we don't want to waste a lot of time answering the same type of questions, so we can get a wide variety. Okay? By Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم. Can you hear me good? Yeah, okay. We have quite an extensive program, but I'll make sure that it is short. I will speak, and then Brother Nisar will follow me for a little while, and then we'll open the floor up for question and answer, which I think is always more productive. I want to actually address 2 main issues. One is the question of spirituality and the youth, and the second is the question of parenting. I believe that these are issues that we as a community have not really addressed. To start with, how do we define Islam? I've seen Islam being defined as a surrender to God. And if you think about it, Islam is not a surrender to God. Because you only surrender when you're defeated, when you have no choice, when you're cornered. That's not what Islam is. Islam is not a surrender to God. It is the active, conscientious, willing submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When a person gives himself or herself completely, willingly to God, that is Islam. To submit yourself completely. You will also notice that in Islam, we always use terms of a kind of a movement. That as human beings, we always are supposed to be moving in a particular direction. A person who is static, who is not moving in his or her life, is not a proper and complete Muslim. Look at the terms we use. Sharia. We use the term Sharia to mean Islamic law, but in actual fact, Sharia does not mean Islamic law. Open the Arabic dictionary, you will see Sharia is a place where there is water, where those who are thirsty go and quench their thirst. So when we follow the Sharia of Allah, we who are thirsty are moving to that watering place to quench our spiritual thirst. Open the Quran. What is the first dua in the Quran? Ihdinas Surat al-Mustaqim. Guide us to the right path. We are always talking of a path, of a movement, of a highway. We talk of the Sunnah of the Prophet. What is a Sunnah? Sunnah is a path which has been laid out in front of us. So Islam is always emphasizing a kind of a movement in a particular direction. It's also very interesting to know that in Islam, the first movement is not a spiritual movement. The first movement is not a physical movement. The first movement is the intellectual movement. You become a Muslim after you have understood what you believe in. You can never be a good Muslim if you do not understand. That is why in Usul al-Din, we believe in Usul al-Din first, right? You will notice there is no taqleed allowed in Usul al-Din. You cannot say that I believe in God because my father said so. It's haram for you to do that. The difference, if you like, the movement from kufr to iman, from non-belief to belief, is through the intellect. In other words, it's an intellectual process you are going through in order to believe in that one God. Have you ever pondered? When you say, La ilaha illallah, what exactly are you saying? Are you saying there is one God? You're not saying that. You're not saying there is one God. You are saying there is no God but one God. You are actually eliminating the false gods first. No God. And you can't stop there, because that's kufr. Illallah, but one God. It's a mental process you are going through of eliminating the false God in order to arrive at the conclusion of that one God. So the first movement in Islam is the intellectual movement. You believe after you have understood, not otherwise. That's why also, by the way, this is the big difference between converts to Islam and converts to Christianity. Those who convert to Christianity, many times they convert out of a kind of instantaneous process. Hallelujah, save the Lord type of thing. Muslims are never like that. You will hardly ever see a person who becomes a Muslim because of a flash of ingenuity or some kind of hallelujah type of experience. On the contrary, when a person becomes a Muslim, it's a thought-out, rational process. Because Islam is a religion which emphasizes the intellectual movement first. However, Islam says, no, you don't stop there. Once you have believed, that's only the beginning. Because then you have the ritual movement. It's only in the furu ad-din, if you notice, then you have the prayers, the fasting, the hajj and zakat, etc. After the intellectual movement comes the physical movement. Then you are bowing down to Allah. Then you are going to Makkah. But our problem, and I think that this is what the modern youth needs to understand, that the reason why we feel so dry, because we have emphasized the ritual so much that we have forgotten the spiritual. I always say that we need to move with the ritual and the spiritual. I'm not saying that we forget the ritual. I'm saying the ritual must be accompanied by the spiritual, otherwise you'll feel very empty. How many times you finish your prayers and you realize that, what have I done? You ask yourself, what have I done? I feel empty inside me, you say. The reason you feel empty is because whereas the body has moved, the heart has not. And Islam says that in order for a person to feel spiritually fulfilled, then he or she must move not only the body but also the spirit many times. You'll find so many people go for Hajj from Houston to Mecca. When they come back, mashallah, the suitcases are full with all the shopping. But the hearts are empty. The reason why the hearts are empty is because whereas the bodies have gone to Mecca, the spirit has remained in Houston. Whereas Islam always says that the ritual must be accompanied by and with the spiritual. This close relationship between the ritual and the spiritual is typified in a conversation near the Kaaba itself. Whereas where the spiritualist, the one who's doing things with the inside, is talking to the ritualist near the Kaaba, and the spiritualist, the mystic, the one who's doing things with his heart rather than just with his body, points to the Kaaba and he says to the ritualist, says, you see the house of the Lord. You see the house of the Lord. I see the Lord of the house. And there is a big difference between seeing the house of the Lord and the Lord of the house. One sees with the outside. The other sees with the inside. There's a very beautiful tradition from Imam Musa al-Kazim alayhi salam, which I'd like to cite in front of you because I find it so very inspiring of what it means to experience the divine. I think this is the term that we should get familiar with. That you experience the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many times I think we have made God something very remote, someone whom we cannot even relate to, whereas Allah is very close to us. One day Abu Hanifa, who was one of the Imams of the Ahlul Sunnah, comes to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And he says, Yabna Rasulullah, I see that your son Musa, when he is praying, people are passing in front of him. How is that possible? You know, amongst the Ahlul Sunnah, if they are praying, you cannot pass in front of them. If you've been to Makkah or Medina, if you pass in front of them, they'll stick out the hand. They will not let you pass. The Imam says, call my son Musa here. Imam Musa al-Kazim at that time was a young boy. He comes in front of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq and in front of Abu Hanifa. Imam al-Sadiq says to Musa, oh my son, Abu Hanifa has a question for you. And Imam Musa al-Kazim says, still ya Abu Hanifa, ask, what is it that you want? Abu Hanifa says, I see when you are praying, people are passing in front of you. How can you allow that? Look at the question that the Imam poses. Ya Abu Hanifa, atakra'u al-Quran? Do you recite the Quran? Abu Hanifa says, of course I recite the Quran. Well, doesn't Allah say in the Quran, وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ? We are closer to the human being than his own jugular vein. Oh Abu Hanifa, the Lord I am worshipping is much closer to me than those people who are passing in front of me. What does it matter if people pass? As long as you feel and experience Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think that's what the message should be to our youth. That Islam is not a religion only of the exterior of the Sharia. The Sharia is important. I'm not saying we should neglect it. But the Sharia must be accompanied with the tariqah, the inner fulfillment, as we call it. And remember, when a person prays with his heart, not only does he pray, he makes others pray with him. There's a very beautiful hadith actually in Bukhari. Bukhari cites this hadith 3 times. It is related by a person by the name of Abdullah bin Mutarrif. And Abdullah says that I went to the mosque in Basra, and Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam came and prayed with us. Your salawat are very cold, aren't they? The weather is... Alhamdulillah, that's much warmer. I like the weather here, you know. I come from Miami, believe me, it's not as hot as this place. In any case, and Abdullah says that as Imam Ali began to pray in Basra, I prayed with him. So there were 2 people praying, Imam Ali and Abdullah. And as we started, another person by the name of Imran bin Hussein came and joined us. So there were 3 people praying, Imam Ali, Abdullah, and Imran bin Hussein. And Abdullah continues, just before Ali ibn Abi Talib went into ruku, he lifted up his hands and said, Allahu Akbar. When he got up from the ruku, before he went to the sajda, he lifted up his hands and said, Allahu Akbar. And he prayed in such a way, Abdullah says, that when Ali finished the prayers, the other person who was praying with me, Imran bin Hussein, came and shook my hand, pointing at Ali, said, لَقَدْ صَلَّى صَلَاةَ مُحَمَّدٍ لَقَدْ ذَكَّرَنِي صَلَاةَ مُحَمَّدٍ. He had prayed the prayers of Muhammad. he has reminded me of how Muhammad himself used to pray. Because when you pray with your heart, you inspire others to pray. That just tells us one thing, that people had forgotten how the Prophet used to pray. It required someone like Imam Ali alayhi salam to come and show them. Salawat Muhammad wa alayhi. You know, these days in America especially, whatever you want to get, you dial a 1-800 number, right? Anything you want is 1-800. Even Allah has opened a 1-800 number now. It's called 1-800-244-34. Go out and dial it. 2 for Subh, 4 for Dhuhr, 4 for Asr, and 3 for Maghrib, and 4 for Isha. Well, one day I was saying this particular anecdote in Mina, and I said, you dial 1-800-244-34. There was a friend of mine who could never decide whether to call me Doctor or Maulana. So he kept calling me Dr. Maulana. And he went outside and literally dialed 1-800-244-34. And he came back and said, Dr. Saab, kya kiya? I said, why? What happened? He said, I dialed and the reply came, your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please recheck your number. So I said, nahi ban sakta, nahi ho sakta. So we tried, and sure enough, the same response came. So we went and checked with the operator. What was wrong? Why couldn't we get through to Allah? And we found out. The reason was because we were in Mina. And when you are in Mina, you pray Qasr. So the number changes there to 1-800-222-32. Because Salat is a form of communication to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Make sure you dial that number. That is, you pray regularly. Salat is nothing but a communication. And that is the way to move towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, if we talk of movement, we must also realize that in order to move, you need to be free. If your hands are tied, if your legs are tied, can you move? Similarly, if your heart is tied, then you cannot be free. Because true freedom requires a person to be free in order to move towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spiritually. You know, in today's culture, we live in a culture of freedom. Everybody's talking of freedom. The youth talk of freedom, and they ask me, is there such a thing as freedom in Islam? The West talks of freedom, but freedom in the West is very different from freedom in Islam. Freedom in the West means for a man to wear an earring. Come back, if you must wear an earring, let's wear 2 of them, or 1 earring. Freedom in the West means for a person to have hair growing in different direction or in different colors. Freedom from God is what they talk of. Islam talks of freedom too. But our freedom is not freedom from God. It is freedom from all those things which come between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is freedom from those desires which block our path. That's why I always say, we do not seek liberation from God. We seek liberation through God. Because when you have Allah, then you have everything else. Then you are free from everything else but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, we are living in a culture today where everybody is challenged, you know. You talk of someone who is mentally challenged, someone who is this challenged. If a person is a bit fat, he's horizontally challenged. You have to use the correct word. You can't tell him he's fat. If he's a bit too short, you tell him he is vertically challenged. We, my friends, are spiritually challenged. Because we have focused so much on the outside, we have forgotten our spirituality. Remember, my sisters and brothers, we tend to think of ourselves as human beings who sometimes have a spiritual experience. That's what we think of ourselves, right? That we are human beings who sometimes we hear a good lecture, you hear the Quran, you hear this, you feel spiritual. And sometimes you have a spiritual experience, but in essence we are human beings. Islamically, that's wrong. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Why do I say that? Because from the spiritual realm we came from, to the spiritual world we shall go back. Between these two spiritual worlds lies the human world. That is why, remember that verse in the Quran? Ya ayyatuhan nafsul mutma'inna. And then, irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan maradiyah. O peaceful, tranquil soul, Allah says, return to your Lord. You only return where you came from. I say that I will return to Miami. But Allah doesn't say that go to your Lord. You go to somewhere where you've never been before, but you return to a place where you came from. That's why Allah uses the term return. When somebody dies, what do we say? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi. Do we say rahibun? We say raji'un. We came there and we returned to the spiritual realm. Between these two spiritual worlds is our human element. And we've forgotten that we are, in essence, spiritual human beings. The essence of what it means to be free is given to us by Abu Dharr. Remember the famous companion of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, whereby Abu Dharr was in Damascus and Muawiyah wanted to test how free Abu Dharr was. So Muawiyah takes some gold and gives it to his slave. Oh slave, take this gold and give it to Abu Dharr. If Abu Dharr takes this gold, you are free today. The slave said, Alhamdulillah, I'm going to be free. Who will reject gold? From Muawiyah too. So the slave comes with the gold to Abu Dharr, says, Ya Abu Dharr, with the compliments of Muawiyah. Abu Dharr says, take it away, I don't need it. Slave says, are you crazy? I'm giving you gold and you don't want it? Abu Dharr says, no, there are people who deserve it much more. Go and give it to them, I don't want it. The slave pleads with Abu Dharr, Ya Abu Dharr, please take this gold. Abu Dharr says, no. Finally, the slave owns up. For my sake, take it. Because if you take this gold, I will become free. For the sake of my freedom, take this gold. Abu Dharr says, if I take this gold, you will become free, I will become the slave of Muawiyah. And Abu Dharr cannot become the slave of anybody else but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what true freedom means. Freedom means to be free from everybody else and only the slave of Allah. My friends, I want to end this section on spirituality and go on to parenting in a few minutes. But in order to feel that spiritual experience, to experience God, as we say, one needs taqwa. What is taqwa? How do we define taqwa? We tend to define taqwa, we've almost made God into a dictator, some kind of a tyrant, you know. We translate it as God-fearing. Haven't you heard it? God-fearing. My friends, we are living in a culture not of fear, a culture of love is what we are in. We have to understand that. You go and tell your youth that you have to fear God, they'll tell you take a hike. But talk to them in their language, you will be able to communicate with them. In my language, Swahili, those who understand Swahili, the way that I was brought up in Zanzibar, I come from Zanzibar, Tanzania, East Africa. I was told Mungu anarungu, and my teacher is there, sitting there, Nisar. Mungu anarungu. Now, for those who don't know, Mungu means God. And rungu is what we call in Urdu, danda, kotak. Just waiting to smack you, you know. That we were brought up in this culture that God is just waiting there for you to make one small mistake and He's going to smack you. That's why we have translated taqwa so very negatively. Interestingly, when you read the Quran, you will find that the Quran talks about the love, compassion, close relationship with Allah 10 times more than it talks about the azab and the chastisement of God. God is so loving, so kind, so merciful, so forgiving. And yet we always talk of the pain and the chastisement of Allah. Remember that Dua Kumail that we recite. I wonder how many of you have actually pondered over this particular verse in Dua Kumail. It tells us of how we should feel close to Allah. Amirul Mumineen, Allah is teaching us how to look upon the close relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what taqwa is, by the way. To feel and experience God. وَهَبْ لِي صَبَرْتُ عَلَى عَذَابِكَ فَكَيْفَ أَصْبِرُ عَلَى فِرَاقِكَ. Oh my Lord, supposing I can bear your punishment, how can I bear separation from you? In other words, Imam Ali is teaching us that the punishment of Allah you can bear, but separation from God you cannot bear. Because the pains of the separation from God are far greater than the chastisement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's how close we are supposed to feel to Allah. Taqwa, my friends, is not God-fearing as much as God-consciousness. For a person to feel the presence of God so that his public and his private life are the same. True taqwa is where what is inside you is exactly what is outside you. That is taqwa. Taqwa does not mean that you put up a pretense. You know, many times we do things and say, nobody's looking, so therefore I can do it. We forget someone is there with us. And when a person has a conscience which is alive, so that something bites when he's about to do wrong, that is a state of taqwa. You know, many times we sin, and we want to justify that sin. You heard of Mullah Nasruddin? Mullah Nasruddin was a fictitious anecdote in Persian literature. But some of the stories behind it are very, I think, enlightening, to say the least. Mullah had a donkey one day, and he had a neighbor too. The neighbor came to the Mullah one day and says, Mullah, I want to borrow your donkey. Mullah was also a miser. Mullah Nasruddin was a miser. He didn't want to give his donkey. So in Janist, he said, he's not here. As soon as the Mullah says, my donkey is not here, the donkey starts making noise outside. He started braying outside. The neighbor said, Mullah, shame on you. Mullah said, why shame on me? He said, you are telling me your donkey is not here, I can hear it outside. How can you lie like this? The Mullah scratched his turban and he said to him, you are silly, you are very stupid, he says to his neighbor. The Mullah said, you are a liar, how can I be stupid? The Mullah said, obviously you are stupid, you believe a donkey, not a Mullah. Anybody who believes that a donkey, not a Mullah, must be stupid. In other words, when a person lies, he has to make up various other lies in order to protect that one lie. And taqwa requires, and remember my friends, when a person has the taqwa, when he's truly loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then something incredible happens. In the Quran itself, Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 282, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ اللَّهِ. Have the taqwa of Allah, and Allah will teach you. Incredible verse, isn't it? Allah will be your teacher. You don't need to go to a house or a university for Allah to teach you. You don't need to go to Him. He comes to you. Because when you are pure, and when you are chaste, that Allah becomes your guide. Salawat wa Muhammad wa. I want to turn to my second topic, and believe me, I don't want to take too long because I know that you are all tired. We, in our own countries, wherever we came from, whether it was Africa, Iran, Iraq, etc., the Middle East, Pakistan, we built up certain institutions to protect us and to protect our younger generation. Our younger generation were taken care of by the madrasa, which they would attend very frequently, 5 times a week. Sometimes they would be taken care of by the mosque also, because the mosque also built up that spirituality. And many times we also relied on the school system, because the school system inculcated values. However, having come to the West, we have found that the school, rather than inculcating values, actually takes those values away. And we also have found that the madrasa, our students attend it only once a week, if they do attend it. And therefore, it has very limited impact on the spiritual lives. It leaves the modern Muslim youth in what we call a moral vacuum. There is clearly a need, therefore, to replace these institutions which have now decayed and are no longer viable with institutions or certain other components which will look after the moral and spiritual well-being of the modern youth. Remember, the youth always talk of this peer pressure, and I remember when I came here last time, I talked about peer pressure and beer pressure and all the pressures that they experience, and how the peer pressure and the beer pressure gives the poor parents blood pressure because of that. But what we need to do as Muslims living in the West now is to replace that negative peer pressure with positive peer pressure. The Ahlus Sunnah, I don't know if you are aware of this, they have a conference every year. They've asked me to go and talk there many times also. And 16,000 Muslims, mainly youth, attend that particular conference. Normally it's held in Indianapolis. You know that? The ISNA Center. 16,000, imagine. Why do they do that? So that the negative outside peer pressure is replaced by a more positive internal Muslim peer pressure, so that the positive peer pressure rubs off on each other. Today, when our youth go out, do we really find out who they're going out with? In other words, as parents, we need to be aware of the friend circle of our youth. I'm not saying that they should not have friends. Of course they must have friends. But who they hang out with, as they tell you, is important. And in Canada especially, they hang out in the malls. You ask them, why are you hanging out in the malls? They say, I want to be a cool Muslim. Have you heard the term? Cool Muslim. I don't know about cool Muslim. In Canada, I'm a frozen Muslim there. It's important for us then to realize that in order to invite the youth back, we have a big challenge in front of us to deculturalize Islam, as they call it. because our practices sometimes are so much entangled with our culture that we are not even sure what is culture and what is religion many times. Many times what we practice is culture rather than religion. I gave an example last time, if I remember correctly, about how our adat have become so much mixed up with our ibadat. Adat are our customs. Ibadat are our, what is the Sharia? And our adat has become more important than ibadat. Culture has become more important than religion itself. The biggest challenge for us as parents is to bring up our youth properly. In the West, we find that the house resembles a musafir khana. You know what's a musafir khana? A place where people just share one roof but lead very separate lives. And we cannot afford to do that. Let us remember that if we do not communicate with our youth, then there are different voices waiting to communicate. There's the email, there's the voicemail, I don't know, there's a telephone, there's a pager, there's a newspaper, television, fax, so many different voices coming to talk to our youth when they are still at home. There's a book that we published a few years ago. I think it's on sale here today. Muslim Youth at a Crossroads. I highly recommend all of you to read it. And what we found in this, we did a survey of our youth in Toronto. What we found was that the youth said that we cannot communicate with our parents, especially with our father. We can talk to them about basketball, about the Raptors, about, I don't know, the Houston Rockets, always losing, I'm told, right? But, yeah, but we cannot talk to them about our personal problems, simply because our father gets very angry when we talk to them. In other words, there is a lack of communication. Not only is there a lack of communication, there is actual indifference by the parents towards the well-being of the youth. The Quran is telling us of how to bring up our children. And I think parenting is a skill in itself which we have neglected. Remember Surah Al-Luqman in Surah number 31 in the Quran. And Luqman is teaching us how to bring up our sons. When was the last time we sat with our children and talked to them like this? Ya bunayya, la tusa'ir khaddaka linnas. Oh my son. See how Luqman is talking to his son. Oh my son, do not turn your cheek away from the people. وَلَا تَمْشِ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَحًا. And do not walk arrogantly on earth. You know, some people are so arrogant, their arrogance comes out in the way that they walk. And Luqman sits with his son and says, don't even walk arrogantly. Why? إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ كُلَّ مُخْتَالٍ فَخُورٍ. Because Allah does not love anybody who is arrogant and one who has pride in him. That's the kind of nurturing that we are talking about. As a parent, I am not only a father, but I'm also a murabbi, someone who's supposed to nurture the inside of the son and the daughter also. We need, especially for the parents, to learn how to communicate. I'm going to give you an example of how we need to be able to talk to our children in their language in order to bring up our children as proper Muslims. Supposing you have an 8-year-old son or daughter comes up to you and says, Daddy, Mommy, why do you pray? What would your response be? Here is your son or your daughter, 8 years old, asking you, why do you pray? What would you say? Because Allah said so? Because of Jannah? It doesn't jive with them. You need to give them a proper response. And this response I found in a book by Jeffrey Lang called Even Angels Ask. And I was so touched by the way that he responded. He says that when my daughter asked me this, his daughter's name was Jamila, I pondered, how should I respond in such a way whereby that response will actually get into her head? And he says, oh Jamila, you know God is a source of love, mercy, and kindness. Just like the sun. Yes, the sun is a source of light. Allah is a source of love, mercy, and kindness. The love that I feel for you, he's talking to his daughter now. Look how he's communicating with her. The love that I feel for you and your mother feels for you, that love is coming from God himself. But when I pray, I feel that God's love and mercy in a very special way. Similarly, just like, for example, he's telling his daughter, when I hug you or when Mommy hugs you, although we love you, but you feel that love in a special way, don't you? You always know that we love you, but when we are close to you, you feel that warmth in a very special way. Similarly, We know that God loves us. He's kind to us. But when we pray, we feel that love of God in a very special way. And when we are touched by Allah's love and mercy, we feel like sharing that love and mercy with those around us. And who are those around us? You, my children, and my daughters, and my son. Because, he continues, that the love of God is so beautiful and powerful that when I look at my family after prayers, I am not only grateful for what Allah has given me, but I want to share that love. It makes me aware. This salat, he's telling us, this salat is what makes me aware of how proud I am to be a father. And then he says, oh Jamila, I'm not the perfect father, but I'm a better father because of the prayers that I pray. I'm a better father because of these prayers. And Jamila says, Daddy, now I understand why you pray. See the language, how he is able to communicate. You see what has happened, my sisters and brothers, that we become parents and we parent the way that we were parented. We bring up our children the way that we were brought up. And that's the mistake we are making. It's a very beautiful hadith by Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. The Imam says that bring up your children differently from the way that you were brought up. Imam Ali, 1400 years ago, he could almost envisage the problems that we are facing. He says, bring up your children, not the way that you were brought up, but differently. Because their zaman, their circumstances are different, and bring them up according to the needs of their time, not according to your time. That was the vision and the foresight that the Imam had. And it is important that as parents, both parents need to work together in order to bring the children up. Today, because many Muslim parents do not know how to bring up their children, you know what's happening? Many children, our children, in our communities, Muslim communities I'm talking of, are being taken away by the Children's Aid Society, whatever they call it. And they are being placed in non-Muslim families because Muslims do not know how to bring up their children. Just a few tips before I finish, and I promise I'll finish in the next 5 minutes, of how to bring up children. Do not discipline your child when you are in anger. Why? Because when you discipline your child when you are in anger, the chances are you'll abuse. Your son, for example, has abused his privileges. He has a curfew at 10 o'clock. He comes in at 11 o'clock at night. Now, if you are just sitting there waiting at the door like Malikul Maut, just waiting for him to come in, so that you can abuse him the moment he comes in, the chances are you will break off all communication. So if he is late, welcome him home first. And then when you have cooled down, then talk to him. I'm not saying you shouldn't talk. I'm not saying that you should not discipline, but there are ways of disciplining. And there are ways of communicating. Therefore, we are told that never discipline when you are in anger, and never ever use abusive language in disciplining. Why? Because when you use abusive language, you are destroying the self-esteem and the confidence of your child. There are ways to discipline, and you must discipline. I'm not saying do not, but there are ways of disciplining. Remember this hadith Qisa, when Imam al-Hassan and Hussein alayhimus salam, when they walk in, how does Bibi Fatima greet them? Do you remember? Ya qurrata aini wa thamarata fuadi. You know what that means? Oh, the delight of my eyes and the fruits of my heart. When was the last time you said that to your children? Oh, the delight of my eyes and fruits of my heart. We use language which I cannot even repeat in front of you. Because, as I said, and when we do that, what we are doing is we are actually demeaning, destroying the self-esteem of the children, and we are also teaching them it's okay to abuse. Also, another important thing when we are parenting, never ever compare. Oh, your brother is doing this, your sister is much better than you. When you do that, then you are creating jealousies between brothers and sisters. You are creating jealousy between the younger and the older. You know, when I was in England a few months ago, I was giving the same lecture, and after I finished, a 7-year-old child came up to me and says, my parents treat me like dirt. I said, what? 7-year-old coming telling me, your parents treat you like dirt. I said, why do they treat you like dirt? When I tell them anything, they never listen to me. When my elder brother tells them to listen to him, his elder brother was 13 years old. Now, because he was young, whatever he was saying obviously did not make much sense to them. So they were listening to the elder, but not the younger one. So they were ignoring him. Because they were ignoring him, he felt that he was being treated like dirt. He was becoming jealous of his elder brother. Rather, when your son or daughter says something which may not make sense, you tell them why they are wrong. Don't neglect them. Because when you neglect them, you're telling them that they are not important. If you feel that you must compare, then don't compare your child with his or her sibling. What you do is compare him with his past or with his future. Say, look, you used to do this much better in the past. In other words, the competition is not between two individuals. The competition is within the individual himself or herself to better themselves. And also, and this is something which is coming from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that when you give something to your children as a parent, make sure that you are just in giving. Don't give one of the children more and the other one less. Again, you are creating competition. The Prophet says that never ever create competition or jealousy between your children. Be just in what you give. Don't give one more and another less. And when we do discipline, we need to have positive reinforcements. In other words, when you tell them that if you do this and this, then you're going to get this and this. In other words, it's a way of disciplining, a way of getting them to do things in a positive way. You praise them. And when you do need to criticize, even the criticism must be positive. We have to distinguish between the act and the person, the child itself. Many times when the child does wrong, what we end up doing is abuse the child and then criticize the action itself. So tell them what they've done wrong, why they've done wrong, and what they could do it to make it right. But do not tell them, Sali Pati could be Haramzadi. Because that is not a language that we should be using. We mix up the act and the person. There's another interesting book, by the way, by Sayyid Fadlallah, and it's called The World of Our Youth. A very interesting book. And he says very clearly that we as Muslims especially have discriminated against our girls. You know, in our own homes, when it comes to for food time, the boy is watching TV with his legs up, mashallah, he's enjoying himself. Whereas the poor girl, the girl in the family, she's heating up the food. And then after the food, when they finish the meal, what happens? He's going back to watch his TV, whereas she is the one with the dishwasher many times. Why isn't he working also in the family? Does Islam say that only the girl is supposed to do the housework, not the boy? What we are doing when we treat our boys more favorably than the girls, we are teaching our sons that you don't have to help out in the housework. It's only the girl's job. Whereas Islam teaches us the opposite. Therefore, he says very clearly, he said, Fadlallah, that laws of Allah are equal for both. If we say that it is haram for a girl to go out and date with somebody, it is equally haram for a boy to do that, isn't it? Does Islam say it is halal for a boy to flirt or not for a girl? The laws are equal for both of them. It is not the case that one is above the other. And therefore, chastity, taqwa, is for both the boys and the girls. My sisters and brothers, I've taken more than my share of time. I'll stop here now, and I'll invite Brother Nisar if you'd like to share a few words. And then we'll go for question and answer. My apologies for taking a bit longer. Salawat wa Muhammad wa.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I guess my student has echoed whatever I have taught him to say all these years. So I don't have much. He did a wonderful job, didn't he? Can we have a salawat for him, please? And I know he has taken more than his share, so what I'll do is, as a good teacher, shut up and wait for the answer, for the questions. Anyway, the books that Dr. Takeem was, see, I call him Dr. Takeem. He mentioned Muslim Youth at Crossroads and the world of our youth, which what I'll do is, would you like to pass it around so that, and I think they're for sale, right?
We have these here that brought a few for sale for $4 each. I've gone through it. It's a wonderful book
good chapter on education there.
So we've got a few of these on hand. If the parents or the youth are interested, $4. Very interesting. This is just one example we have, so you all can take a look at this, and if you're interested, then we'll take the orders and order some from Toronto. Very good book, very good indeed. This one, I think, is 10 US, right?
I don't know. Dr. Takeem?
We'll find the price for that, but it's no more than 10. We'll give it to you for 10 Canadian. Are we ready for questions?
Okay, yeah. See, what the thing is, most of our lectures are usually monologues, and before we have more people disappear, I think we should have a dialogue. And that's the future trend, I think, we're going to have, that more and more of our majlises will be dialogues rather than monologues. We had to endure. I know when I was a kid, I couldn't understand the language, and yet I had to sit still and quietly and take in whatever was coming to me. I didn't understand a thing. Okay. But now, alhamdulillah, you have majlises in English, and yet we find that the attendance is poor, and people ask, why? We have majlises in English for our youth. Why are they not here? There's an answer to that. Have we tried to find out whether the timing is correct, whether it's exam time, whether there are lectures at that time, whether the topics that are discussed are relevant, whether the person who's giving a talk has done his research or her research. Okay, those are kind of things that we as parents have to work on. And especially, it would be a good idea if the community, if the executive involved the youth in the planning of the majlises, lectures, and so on. And I was glad to hear that you have Speaker of the Month, and you have people like Sheikh Al-Asi who came and talked to you. He's a prolific speaker. Okay, there are others, alhamdulillah. Dr. Takeem is always available, and the others would also come and talk. That's excellent. Also, our youth who are in the universities right now, be mentors to the young ones. Be their career counselors, because they will soon be going to university, and they need to be guided. And those who are older, again, you be mentors to those who are at university. Be career counselors for them. Take them right through. I would suggest that any professional person finds out about a youth in our community who is taking the same course, the same area of specialty that he or she has done, and guide through that person through university, and also involve that person in job shadowing, so that the work, the future becomes better for them. And the more educated people we have in our community, the stronger our community will be. Because an educated person will not only look at his secular education, but at the same time at his religious education, and remember what they got from the madrasas that they came from. Okay? And again, it's our attitude that will determine our altitude in life. I think we should open for questions.
We have this green sheet. If you want to write the question, you're welcome to write. Or if you feel like you want to come to the mic and address your questions, so that would be fine too.
And we won't consider the questions as green.
Last time when I came here, I remember there were so many questions that we could not answer them. We had the time was not enough. Today, it seems people are a bit more shy. No?
Anybody brave enough to be number one? Asad? No burning questions? Muhammad got a question. Here's the mic. Stand there.
Assalamualaikum. My question was that you were talking about, being spiritually inclined, how Islam is all about, it's like 100% spiritual experience. I'm kind of, I don't know, I just don't know how you can be 100% spiritually inclined, like living in the United States. And I just, if you could just clarify how youth could, how can a youth be spiritually?
The question, as I understand it, how can you be spiritually inclined if you're living in America? See, spirituality is not a trade-off with material. In other words, it's not that if you are spiritual, then you don't have to be material. A person can be spiritual and live with this world at the same time. Spirituality basically means, and this taqwa, etc., does not come about overnight. It's not something you can go in Kmart and buy. It's something that you have to inculcate within you with certain types of spiritually inclined exercises, shall we say, meditation, etc. But having said that, a person can meditate, a person can be spiritual. That doesn't mean that you shut off yourself from the world. What you can do is, as the Quran says, "La tansa nasibaka fid dunya." Do not forget your portion in this world too. That's why in the Quran we recite that dua, "Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana." Oh Allah, give us goodness in this world and in the next. So performing certain spiritual exercises does not exclude the possibility of us living as proper and good Muslims even in this society, because you carry your spirituality wherever you go and you undertake the spiritual exercises on a daily basis, and yet interact with society. There are certain stages to go through which I would need a lot of time to explain, but maybe next time. Big question. Okay, the question is, how come Islam doesn't emphasize females to take on a political role? For we cannot do ijtihad and are suppressed in the political realm. Who says that you cannot do ijtihad? Islam does not say that women cannot do ijtihad. They can be mujtahid, they cannot be a marja, taqlid, that's different. But ijtihad, in fact, there have been female mujtahida to be exact, in the past, and therefore there's nothing which stops a woman from playing a very important political realm. There are now, I'm told, judges in Iran. There are women who are stand as MPs or whatever in the Iranian parliament. So where does Islam say that women cannot have any political role? I was saying, where was I speaking yesterday? Somewhere. That, in Miami. That in the time of the Prophet himself, the women would come and vote. Because there are some, I don't know about here, but there are so many masajid centers which do not allow women to vote. Only men vote. So why not? Why do you take away something which Islam has given to the women? What right do we have to take it away from them? Because in Iran they vote. In the time of the Prophet, the women would come and give bay'ah to the Prophet also. So if Islam gives them that right, who has the right to take it away from them? Can a Muslim girl marry a Christian or a Jew or some other major religion that believes in one God? A Muslim girl can only marry a Christian or a Jew provided he converts towards Islam, not otherwise. This is for the simple reason that the chances are many times that the child follows the religion of the father very frequently. The influence of the father becomes very strong. And also, of course, Islam wants to bring people into Islam rather than make them leave Islam. That's why she is not allowed to marry a Christian or Jew unless he converts. If marrying is not available for a Muslim girl who has not ever married, can she sighe? Okay. As I understand it, if marrying is not available for a Muslim girl who has never been married, is it allowed for a Muslim girl to do muta? I think this is what they're trying to ask. If she has never been married, it is makruh, and they would require the permission of the parents, the father in particular. is it sinful to perform aesthetic surgery to enhance feminine beauty? I assume this is coming from the women's side. I think that we should always bear in mind whether, this person goes through surgery or whatever, or makeup, whatever, that there has to be a certain amount of chastity and a certain amount of simplicity in a girl. That doesn't mean that she cannot beautify herself for certain people, but not to make a show of it so that she becomes a source of attraction. Remember that hijab is meant to produce a morally pure society. I always say, and I'll say it again in front of you, that hijab does not keep a woman in. It keeps a stranger out. Hijab does not keep a woman in. It keeps a stranger out. It's supposed to create a morally pure society. And if a person wants to go through surgery for whatever reason, that's fine, but not at the expense of revealing her beauty to those who should not be seeing it, or of removing the hijab. If she wants to, for the surgery, in order for other women to see her, and that's fine. How do you make your parents understand the society you live in and not parent? How do you make your parents understand the society you live in and not parent you in the way that they were brought up? Okay. In other words, how do you make your parents understand that the circumstances have changed and they should not be parenting you the way that they were brought up? I think it's important for this. That's why we need communication, we need extra lectures, and I think that it's important that the parents themselves attend such lectures, whereby we need counselors, Muslim counselors, we need people, teachers, and also at the same time the Maulanas should be talking more and more about the importance of correct parenting. Because when we do not parent correctly, we do not bring up our children correctly, the chances are we will lose more and more of our children. The children have a particular mindset, but that does not mean, by the way, that the children should be spoon-fed and they get things their own way. They also have to be disciplined properly. But I think we have a problem in many Muslim communities. As I say, I've been involved in many cases whereby because of lack of parenting skills, children have been taken away from homes. What are the spiritual exercises? Can you give us a written paper? I can give you a written paper, but not now. I mean, I've written papers on this also. There are certain stages of spiritual exercises, starting from extra zikr, extra fasting, recitation of the Quran, salat, etc., and certain stages to be gone through in order to attain what we call spiritual perfection in Sane Kamil. That will have to come maybe, inshallah, in a future lecture. Huh? The youth nowadays don't want to listen to anything. They want to be free once they are 18. I thought it was 16. What do you suggest for them? Even during English speeches, they don't come. And if they come, they're talking, laughing, and not paying attention to the speaker. That's where I think the role of the parents comes in again. If I can give my own personal experience, I'm sure Brother Nisa will agree. When we were brought up in Zanzibar, my father would say, you come with me and you sit right next to me in the mosque. And you don't utter a word. Some form of parenting and disciplining is important. It's very essential. I mean, we just cannot let the youths have everything that they want. Certain programs can be kept to tailor and meet their needs. But also at the same time, they have to be told, look, you're coming to the mosque. There is an English lecture. If you have questions, you can ask at the end. But certain amount of pressure has to be exerted from the parents too. And I think that the youths also should be told that, look, you cannot have programs, every program the way that you want it. Certain programs, yes. But that's the only way, I think. I don't see any other way unless somebody else has any other way to make sure that the youths do attend the lectures and listen to them. Why do we pray 5 times? Why not 3 or 2 times? You'd want to get with everything, huh? Remember, my sisters and brothers, the prayers are 5. The timings are 3. Look at the Quran itself. And I don't want to go into the details of this, but look at the Quran in Surah Banu Israel. وَاقِمُوا الصَّلَاةَ لِدُلُوكِ الشَّمْسِ إِلَى غَسَقِ اللَّيْلِ وَالْقُرْآنِ الْفَجْرِ إِنَّ قُرْآنَ الْفَجْرِ كَانَ مَشْهُودًا, the Quran says. And undertake the prayer when the sun starts to decline. When the sun starts to decline? At Zuhr time. Because the sun gets exactly up ahead and then it starts declining. So that's the first prayer mentioned in the Quran itself. And when the darkness sets in, the second prayer. What's the first prayer? When the sun starts to decline. Second prayer mentioned in the Quran, when the darkness sets in. Not when the sun sets. When the darkness, when it becomes dark. That's why we wait till it becomes dark when we pray Maghrib. While Quran al-Fajr and the morning recitation, the morning prayer. Quran here doesn't mean the Quran itself, it means recitation. So the Quran itself mentions only 3 times, but 5 prayers. We also pray 5 prayers, don't we? Don't we pray Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha? And if you open Sahih Muslim, you will see so many traditions. I have translated this book, and there's so many traditions in it, in which the Prophet himself used to pray 3 times, but 5 prayers, the way that we do. And it's in their books also. So for those who say that, no, we are going against the Sunnah of the Prophet himself sometimes used to pray 5 times, sometimes 3 times, and we are allowed to do both. We can pray 5 times, we can separate our prayers, or we can join them together. Could we have a tape of your speech? I think, Naushad, you should be answering. Do we have a tape? We have a tape. I don't know why you want one. But anyway, yeah, apparently there is a tape here. Why women cannot be a marja? That's a difficult one. Because there are certain, I think one has to be a marja. In order to be a marja, one has to have taqleed, and one has to have people following her, and one has to be able to lead prayers many a time. And because of the state women sometimes get into, it's difficult for them to exercise. And many times, because of the nature of the questions which are posed, very delicate and personal questions, it will be very difficult for women to be marjas. That's the only answer that I can give at the moment. You have more questions? Do feel free by that to ask verbally. You don't have to write it down. Okay, when we give adhan, we incorporate Hazrat Ali's name with Allah and the Prophet. If Islam is about one God and the last messenger, why is it necessary to include leaders, that is imams, and why is it necessary to perform taqleed? Since we do believe in Allah and the Prophet Muhammad and not the Ahlul, if we do believe in the Allah and the Prophet, not Ahlul Bayt, what are the consequences? We are all aware, I think, that the Shahada of Imam Ali is not a part of the adhan, but it is mustahab, highly recommended to mention it. But you cannot mention it as part of the adhan. We are aware of this, I'm sure. But there is a hadith from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam, in which the Imam says, whenever you say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, also say Aliyun Waliyullah, to affirm your wilayat, the belief in the wilayat of Amirul Mu'mineen. So as I say, it's not part of the adhan. You cannot recite it as part of the adhan, but do recite it, if you would like to, as sunnat, because of the hadith from Imam as-Sadiq. And why do we include the leaders? Because for us, although the prophecy ends with the Prophet, but God's guidance does not end with the Prophet. Allah's guidance continues through the A'immah. That's why we insist on the wilayat of not only Imam Ali, but all the 12 Imams. You cannot just believe only in 1 or 2 Imams. So the reason why we emphasize the Imams and not just Allah and the Prophet, simply because, as I say, Allah's guidance continues through the Imams. And therefore we do taqleed also, because our maraji are the ones who would tell us how to perform our religious obligations. Pieces on it. Okay, some people might mistakenly think that bringing up the children according to the circumstances means forgetting the unchangeable values and rules of Islam, such as hijab, etc. However, it is the way of implementing the same rules and values that has to be geared towards society circumstances and different times. I appreciate if you would elaborate this. When we talk of bringing up children in a different way according to the needs of the time, does not mean that our values change, that suddenly what was haram becomes halal and vice versa. No. What we mean to say is how we discipline, how we communicate, how we parent, the skills that we use in order to reach our children, that has to change. But the basic values of what is right and what is wrong, salat, whether it is the fasting, zakat, or whatever it may be, that cannot change, because those are given and stated in the Quran and the Hadith. I hope this makes it clear. And even the hijab is such, we cannot say ignore it because of the needs of time. Because as I mentioned, the hijab is an essential part of Islamic practice. And hijab, I should also say, is not only for the women, it's also for the men. The Quran says, first talks to the men, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُم. Tell the believing men that they should lower their gaze. In other words, even the man has to observe hijab in his eyes. Any further questions? Yes, brother.
Hello? Yeah.
We
Can
hear
you can you tell us how you see in different centers and different places in North America the ideas you're talking about, how much effort is going on those to engage youth in those centers? I mean, I see that as a big problem, which we all involve in our cultural things and not talking to our youth in their language.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And unfortunately, I will have to say that in most centers, in my experience, most communities don't want to wake up. Most parents don't have an inkling of what's going on. They don't seem to want to understand. They don't want to bother to go into the details of what's happening. And therefore, most of the majlises I find we have what we call ethnic centers, ethnic mosques. You have a Pakistani mosque, you have an Irani mosque, you have an Iraqi mosque. There is very little communication between them. There is very little of what we may call the need to provide for the future generation. We are not even training the scholars who can provide education and proper training to our youths. We are not even looking into the needs of the time. I was talking to Brother Naushad today. Have we ever given, and I'm sorry to be so blunt, but you'll excuse me, if we want to talk about the problems, let's talk about it clearly and honestly. Have we ever talked about the problems of homosexuality in the Muslim community? And don't tell me it doesn't exist, because I can assure you it does. There are Muslim gays, lesbians, there are Muslim societies for gays, etc., which encourage. And if we say, no, we shouldn't talk about this, then we're making a very big mistake. So in order to resolve problems, the first step is to talk about it. We don't even want to talk about it. Believe me, it gives me great joy to see that you people are willing to discuss and talk about it now. But that's only the first step. And there are solutions. We can't say there are no solutions. There are solutions. But it's time that we stop looking for excuses. We start seeking solutions. Most of the time, when we talk to people, oh, it's these Western countries, oh, this kafir. The problem is in our community. We have to resolve it. We can't stop blaming others for our problems. We should start resolving it within our own selves. And when we start blaming others, then we live in a culture of negativism, a culture of isolation. We can't do that. So as I travel, and I've traveled in most Shia centers throughout North America, some centers, yes, they are trying to come up. Los Angeles is one of the jamaats which I find is very, very active. Toronto is also one of those. But many others are just frequently don't even know what is happening, don't care to know. They just want to perpetuate the rituals. Yes, brother.
Assalamu alaikum. We're talking about the youth and the parents and everything, but we know that the parents mostly are working, they're not at home, and the youth are more exposed to the culture of America or TVs and the schools and different friends that they are not Muslim in this society. Do you have any kind of practices for the youth to suggest it to them, to bring them to the culture that we are looking for that the parents cannot do? For example, for my kids, I haven't told them or forced them to not watching TV, but I told them every day they want to watch TV, they had to read one page of Quran, what's the meaning of it.
either in Persian meaning or English meaning. Do you have, if you and let them decide it between what is good and what is bad. They are watching TV and at the same time reading Quran too. Do you have any kind of practices like this for the youth people?
First of all, let me suggest, with all due respect, I would not do what you are doing, because the youths many times are vulnerable. They are not always in a position to decide what is right and what is wrong. I would, as a parent, I would strongly monitor what programs my child and my children watch on TV. It's good for you to tell them, okay, read 1 page of the Quran. I would say read 2 pages, fine. That's not a big deal. What I would be concerned is if I was to give free rein to my children to watch whatever they want on the TV, because there's a lot there, including Dallas, which they shouldn't be watching, which even the parents shouldn't be watching. So that's one point. Yes, there are. I remember when I came in April, we went through quite a few points of what the community, the parents, the madrasas should be doing in order to resolve what we call the youth problems. There are events, there are certain types of lectures, is more communication at home which is necessary. There's more activities together between the youths and the parents. All these things will help create that healthy environment to fill the spiritual vacuum within the youth today. There's much more, but I do not have the time to go into that. We talked about it, as I say, in April. Maybe you were not here at that time. Are there any other questions? Yes, brother. Use the microphone, please. Or then shout a bit.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
I think the main thing which I feel is we have a dialogue between children and us, and we never ask the children their problems, what they are facing. I wish, sometimes you ask all the children a survey, what kind of problem they're facing, why they don't want to come to the center, why they have offended by these speeches, when they come to Majlis in Muharram. We don't give anything to them because we force them to bring to Majlis, and you are at the young time, you mentioned, yeah, your culture was same, everything was same, but here is different. You cannot say that kid to come down here. The lacking problem we have here, we don't talk to the kids, and even today, we should ask the kids, what are the problems they are facing, why they don't like to enter the center. And you say 100% spiritualism. The kid was asking the question, how can you be 100% spiritualism? How can you develop this in the kid when you don't give the chance? As compared to the other society, we ask about ISNA. They have twice in a meeting, like now in Chicago, they're going to have next month. And they have developed it, and there are 45 Islamic centers in Houston where they go for Friday prayers. Our kids don't get those chances. They have so many mosques here. We have only 1 or 2 mosques, and it's very difficult for our kids to get involved in those things.
Well, before I answer, I think you have posed a very important point. Maybe we can ask some of these youth if they'd like to answer this, as to why they don't come, what are the problems and tensions that they feel. Would any of the youth like to talk? Boys or girls? We won't brand you, we promise. I think part of the problem is just this, their silence. You know why they're so silent? Because they're scared to talk. Whenever the parents are there, they will not talk. When I go to certain places, I only meet only the youth, and then you'll see them. They really talk. But when there are parents around, they're shy. That's part of the problem. Maybe next time we can have only a youth session. Believe me, that I've experienced it, that they open up much more when they feel free to talk. The book that we talked about, that actually has a survey in it, in which the youth are telling us some of the issues one can discuss. So it is they who are talking to us. I agree that when I cannot cover everything in this short time period, but there is plenty that one can discuss. Whether it is the spirituality, or whether it is sports, or whether it is youth activities. But one thing, Brother Nisar made an important point, that we need English lectures, and we already have English lectures. English lectures are just one small solution. The contents of the lectures are also important. Our youths today go to universities, they go to colleges, where they are challenged intellectually. And when they come to the mosque and somebody continues to talk about the same thing over and over again, about Abu Bakr and Umar, etc. But we have heard this so many times. So we need to develop new themes and new topics in order to get the attention of the youth. We cannot talk about the same old topics, even if it's in English. Yes, but there's one question here. He hasn't asked a question yet.
I would like to know if it is possible, please, let us know about the Rashad Khalifa, which has omit one of the verses of the Quran, one or two verses of Quran. Let us know how bad it was and give us more information about that, how we can condemn his action, you know? That's my question.
Rashad Khalifa?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's exactly within the topic here, and Rashad Khalifa has got his own problem with the number 19, which he misinterpreted completely. You're talking about Rashad Khalifa, right? The guy who was assassinated recently. I really haven't done the research on him, but I do know that, from what I know, that he was interpreting the Quran or misinterpreting the Quran according to number 19. Many times he was omitting verses of the Quran in order to match up to that number 19 of his. And he started a movement which was quite popular among certain circles at least, until finally he was killed by one of his own disciples, if I remember correctly. You had a question there, brother? Unless there is any question from the sisters. Yes, brother. You want to finish? Okay. Well, we have only 5 more minutes.
I had an experience when I was in Iran that one of our Maulana, they were giving a lecture every night to the people after the prayer, but on a certain day, like Thursdays, it was only for the children. And mostly the mosque was full of children in that night. And all the talking was only to the kids about their stories or whatever from the book and everything. So I believe we bring the kids here, we bring the youth over here, and they listen the same thing, or they cannot understand it sometimes. They are so talking high position or whatever to the like that you have to have some preparation before you listen to those words or to those lectures. So the youth need a little bit less, I believe, more simple talking and those things that is not happening. That's the reason that when we bring them here, they get tired easily and they don't want to come to the center maybe because they think that they're not learning anything. What do you think about that?
Let me answer that. I'll just add one perspective. For example, the dialogue with youth, these were set up to do precisely what you're saying. This is the second or third we've had this. And for this tonight's program, we sent up over 300 flyers. Each and every member was registered and had an address. And you can see how many of us are here. So even when those things are being arranged, you don't have the participation. The parents have to bring the youth in here. This was set up, was announced, I don't know how many times in the center. On Friday, on Thursday, on the recording, the flyers were sent out. We spent $250 just mailing the flyers. But how many youth do we have here? I can count it. 20, 25? I just want to get that perspective that the center is trying to do this. It takes time, effort, and money to arrange these things. But when then you have 10% participation, you say maybe the community doesn't need it.
I think, yeah. The point
I think we just started this, and probably mostly they don't know the result of it yet. So we have to continue going. If we just keep doing it 2 times and then forget about it again for a year, then that's what is going to happen again.
See, I take your point. I think it's a valid point that the majlis, our traditional majlises, will not appeal to many youth. For the simple reason, I, as a speaker, many times I find it difficult to talk to the youth and the parents and the younger and the elder generation, the intellectuals and the traditionalists, all in one sitting. Therefore, it would be good, especially in terms of months of Muharram, whereby you have special lectures for youths only. Because, as I say, when the speaker addresses himself to the elder generation, the youth are feeling alienated, and vice versa. So that's one thing that one could do at certain times of the year. You had a question, brother. in Canada.
What are other things that I should suggest for the youths?
Yeah,
I think that
what other
there's so
things
many.
we can do that would help the youth develop?
It's many things. As I mentioned, I talked about this at length when I came in April. But first of all, we have to gear up the madrasa itself. I mean, I'm not talking about this particular madrasa, but having visited so many madrasas, they are completely inadequate. The methods, the style, the curriculum, etc. That's one dimension of teaching the youth. Parents, we need to talk more and more to the parents to make them aware of the problem. Parenting skills, communication, we need youth counselors, you need hotlines, you need to revamp, because we don't need mosques as much as we need community centers now. Because you need, where youth can play. And once they come to play, then you make them pray. And then you have the pay also, because it doesn't come free. So there's so many things that the community can do, that different types of programs, the lectures. But I think also Brother Naushad's point is extremely important, that when we talk about youth, this and that, when he does arrange the program, there's so few people to attend. So that is part of the problem also. Yeah, I think that's where the the parents and the community must put a foot down. If you want to come and play, you must also come and pray. You cannot separate the two. Yes, brother. Last question, because I think we're going over time. Alaikum salam.
Well, I just want to say really quickly, I mean, like, as a youth, I know what the problem is. It's a language barrier, obviously, with the elders, right? I've been here for 10 years so far, and I realized that the way they teach us here, I mean, it's obviously the Islamic boundary we have, but I mean, our culture here, I guess, has changed quite a bit. I mean, we're more, I guess, Americanized in one way. We realize that, American culture, obviously, is a lot different from the Pakistani culture, or the Iranian culture, whatever we come from. So, I mean, it's more of a language barrier rather than just, like, enforcing, like, well, come to play basketball, then pray at the same time. You have to come at the same level as the student, and, like, I guess teach us on the same level as we, like, learn in school and that. So, I mean, like, a lot of parents, like, criticize, like, well, our kids can't come because they don't, like, listen to speeches. But it's not a matter of the kids coming. It's a matter of, like, how the kids are taught in IEC. It's a totally different level of how we learn in school and how we learn in IEC on Sunday schools. So it's more of a language barrier rather than it's, like, the kids, like, not wanting to come to IEC anymore.
What language do you normally speak in here?
I'm not saying, like, language barrier, like, like how, I mean,
Substance.
the cultural barrier, that's what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
I'm saying the kids have changed their culture in, like, a bigger sense. Like, our parents are obviously more Pakistani, and, like, where the kids are obviously more Americanized.
The kids have got American culture. There's no doubt about that.
Wait, what?
The kids have got American culture, and it's something that we have to come to terms with.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying to the parents. I mean, because the parents, like, don't realize that the kids have changed from what the parents have,
Yeah.
Parents' culture.
I think when he's talking about language, he means the substance, rather than the language itself. The substance of what is delivered. That's why I say we have to meet the needs now, because our kids are learning a lot of things.
Like what you
And
said
we
was
have
right,
to
like,
be able to talk to them at their level of understanding, not just the language, but the level of
what you said was
understanding.
right about how we come and, like, always learn about, the Suluddin, the same time Fruddin, right? Like Abu Bakr and
No,
Umar. Like,
we need
more,
to answer some of the questions that the kids are being posed
like, ask
in
us
the West.
questions, so,
Whether
like, we
it's
can tell you.
euthanasia, whether it is medical ethics, or whatever it may be.
Like, ask us the questions, so, like, we can tell you, like, what is the problem, then you can address that then.
I think there has to be more communication, more rapport. Okay, you had your question. Yeah, all right. How come those youths are not asking?
Don't get intimidated. Come forward, we'll get you the mic here. If you are youth that have questions, then we will listen to them. If they are adults,
We won't.
we'll not get this time, because your questions are tough. You can intimidate because your parents are listening on now, so to go to the rest of you for a while. Yes, sir. Come forward, don't be scared.
Hello. I just want to add to his thing where he says simplifying stuff, and there's also the thing about attitude problems with some of the adults. They speak to kids as an adult way. They don't understand that they need to be spoken to in a kid way, actually. Well, they're talking to us like we know everything, and some things we don't know, so they need to tell us politely, basically.
Yeah. Well, we're talking of speaking to them rather than speaking at them.
Yeah.
As I said, we need to speak to them rather than speaking at them, right?
Exactly.
Any question, any further? Because we need to get going, I think, now. I have a workshop tomorrow morning here. He has one question, I think. William's there.
Anybody has a question? Sure, go ahead.
They need the mic.
They need the mic.
None? Does anybody need a mic? Must be a youth, but it's not a youth.
Choka sasa. Naushad, choka sasa. Umechoka. Wacha ulize. Yeah, 5 more minutes and we'll...
Yeah, brother, you're right. I'm not a youth, but I was so impressed with what the male youths were saying, and I was really wondering if any youth wants to start coming forward and having them come and talk at the mosque and having them deliver a 20-minute speech so that we can hear their thoughts, we can hear their language. And it was really interesting hearing those boys speak, but I really feel that if we want to address them, and rather than ask them, do you want us to talk about euthanasia, I'd much rather have it, would you like to come forward and talk about euthanasia, and then we can tell you what Islam has to say about it. And since the boys are here, it will be a good time to know if they will be interested in doing that and would like to start that.
Let the youth speak. By the youths, for the youths, to the youths.
You had a burning question, you? If it's a short one, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, for very briefly, I'll just repeat the point. It's a very valid point that our youth, when they go to universities, colleges, they are confronted with MSS, a lot of hostilities from other Muslims, and sometimes the questions are posed regarding their faith. One of the things that I am hoping one day I'll be able to do as the chairman of the Islamic Education Board is to prepare a booklet, because we know exactly what sort of questions will be posed to our youth, and we want to be able to respond to those questions even before they are posed. So one of the things that hopefully one day, if I get time, I want to work on is to question this and this. This is your answer, if you are ever asked. Questions about why you Shias pray 3 times, not 5 times, why you have more, etc. These are the sort of issues we are very right, and many youths go off track because they're confronted. And this, by the way, this confrontation is not only in the schools, it's not only in the universities, it's in the prison, it's over the internet, it's even in the mosques also. So hopefully we should be able to resolve this. If somebody is willing to work on it, I just don't have the time, it will be very, very beneficial. Inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum.
I'd like to thank Dr. Takeem and Brother